Now, if the only figures that matter are your own, your market, how much you can charge, what your costs are, how you design your business plan. But if you look at my figures, you'll see that my $20,000 hasn't happened. I'm only going to earn, after paying those expenses there, about $11,000, say. Of course, I might be happy with that because, after all, my hobby has paid for my camera, it's paid for my computer, it's made a contribution to my household expenses. But nevertheless, if I wanted to receive those things and have my $20,000, I'd have to be charging something like $1,500. Now, I've saved that as a scenario called part-time shoot and share. But let's suppose that I'm 2 years down the track, everything's going really well. I want to end my day job and work full-time as a photographer. Now, I've prepared a full-time shoot and share scenario, and I'll just step you through that quickly. I've made a few changes. First of all, obviously, I'm expecting to make more money from my photography, so I've allowed $80,000 there. And bear in mind, of course, that this is taxable income, so tax has to be deducted from that. But I'm working full-time now. 40 hours a week I'm prepared to dedicate to my photography. I'm still doing just weddings. Again, I'm not doing anything by way of portraits or anything else. 100% from weddings, but I'm going to do 48 weddings, one a week basically, which means I need to earn, on that rough calculated, about $1,700 each. But I haven't changed my pricing. I've increased my promotion slightly because now I've got to attract more weddings, obviously. Not employing anybody, but the big change really is that I have to take my overhead seriously because I don't have my job. So I accept that there's a crossover here between your private expenditure and your business expenditure, and goodness knows where that begins and ends. But still, I've put in a contribution for rent of $10,000. I've added in a contribution for power, business insurance, online hosting. I put in a workspace sub there for reasons I'll explain in a minute. Professional fees like accounting, for example. I haven't changed the subscriptions, but I've added a little bit of money for professional development, seminars, etc. And I've increased the motor vehicle running costs. Now, they may or may not be realistic overheads for you, but that's what I've put in here, $25,000 worth. And I've added in also the company cars, $30,000, and I've put that over 5 years. So $6,000 a year I've got to find out of these weddings. And finally, I haven't made any changes to the job costs, sticking with the same business plan, except that I've deleted the online hosting charge per job because I've replaced that with a subscription, which is considerably cheaper with this number of weddings. So what's the impact of that on my bottom line? And the answer is it's not good, because after paying all these expenses, I'm only left with $5,000 in the hand. And I can see here that if I wanted to achieve my income goal, $80,000, I'd need to be charging about $2,600, which would give me that $1,700 in the hand. So let's say that's not sustainable, because I don't think that it is. What can we do about it? So there are a number of things, and this is where the calculator comes into its own as a sort of a machine for playing what if. What if I did this? What if I did that? So what could I do? One of the nice things about this is that I'm still only working 2 days a week. I've only allowed 2 days a week for these weddings, so I've got 3 days free. So I could certainly go up here and I could add more categories of photography. And that would do two things, not one, two things. It would bring in more revenue, but it would also mean that I could split up my overheads and my capital costs over these three categories. And in effect, what the calculator would do would be to spread them across here, these three columns, according to the percentages that I put up here. So for example, if I expected to make $80,000 and I was going to earn 50% from weddings and 50% from portraits, that would be 40, that would be 40, and over here it would split up these costs in the same proportion. What else could I do? Well, I could sit here and I could say, what would happen if I decided to charge $4,000? And understand these are always averages per wedding. What does that do down at the bottom here? Well, that gives me an income of $150,000. But then I would say, well, maybe it's not very likely I can hit 48 weddings, maybe 30. And you can see the effect of that. We're now back to our $80,000. So the calculator is saying 30 weddings at $4,000 equals 48 weddings at 2.5. Worth thinking about, right? And then you come down to the expenses. What would happen if I employed staff? What would happen if I had external premises rather than working from home? And so on and so forth. All of these things can be taken into account. But there was one other thing which this brings to mind, and that is when we were looking at revenue at the top of the page, we had no allowance for product sales. Queensberry would say maybe 100% markup at least is what you'd expect on the wholesale costs. So you need to make allowance there with your job cost as well. First of all, for the cost of buying the product, but also with time. Now from Queensberry, we're offered free colour correction, free album design. So there's not really a lot of time to put into this column except for the time involved in making the sale. So that's what I mean by playing what if. Actually, when you get involved in it, it's really quite fun. And it's a great way of assessing the viability of your business plan. Thanks for listening.